Shana, welcome to the Orgasmic Lifestyle Podcast. And thank you so much for taking part in this interview today. I'm very happy to have you here. You are a love and
Thank you.
relationship coach and author of Honest Sex. For those who are unfamiliar with your work, could you tell us what you do?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's always evolving in a way. I've been doing this for about 20 years, coaching people on their love lives and relationships and often their leadership styles as well. Um, and the recent book, Honest Sex, I've definitely been focusing a lot more on sex, but I think the way I tend to work with sex is everything around the physicality and the positions, right? It's like I work with the communication and the emotional dynamics and people knowing and loving themselves. And so I just love that deep work of people starting to know what they actually want, not from expectations or who they thought they should be, but from what is real and true for them. And then being able to communicate that and creating relationships that I was going to say last, but for me, it's not necessarily about whether they last. It's like, are they deep and connected and meaningful and intimate for as long as they last, right?
So when you mentioned leadership, is that related to sexuality as well, to relationships as well?
Well, the way that I work with people tends to be around, okay, what impact are you having on others? And are you aware of it? And how conscious are you of that? And so the leadership can show up whether it's in the bedroom or the boardroom, right? So,
Okay.
how much do people trust you and respect you and feel enrolled by you? And how genuine are you? And so, yeah, it looks very different in the boardroom and the bedroom, but a lot of the principles are actually the same.
Oh, that's so interesting. The boardroom, the bedroom
Yeah.
is similar. Okay, I
Yeah.
saw your TED Talk, what
Mm.
1000 Men's Tears Reveal, and I saw your podcast is called Man Alive. So what inspired you to focus on men?
Good question. So I was actually doing a master's in psychology and thinking I was going to work with women about 20 years ago. And then I was invited to participate in a workshop where I got to give honest and loving feedback to men. And it was created because I was part of this conscious community. We were 20 somethings, and we were trying to figure things out and trying to be authentic. And two of the guys who received so much benefit from being with honest and loving women decided to create a course for men. And so they invited us to be part of a team to give this feedback, for men to understand like what is happening with women. If you have blind spots or if you're not having the results you want with women, then why is this happening? And a lot of women, I think, we don't have any obligation to someone we go on a date with to say, when you talked about something this way, that's when I got turned off, or this is the part that broke my trust, or this is where I'm not attracted to you. But if it was this way, I would be attracted to you. Right. So it's like out in the world, women don't necessarily give that information, or they can't. Sometimes it's more just like, I'm not feeling it, and I can't quite put words to it, but I'm not feeling it. So to me, it became this beautiful, relationship where I feel like I get to love men through being honest and helping them understand what's going on that has been confusing and frustrating and even maddening.
Has honesty been a kind of thread of your work throughout these years? Has it been
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
recurring
Yeah. Like
theme?
honest and loving, right? Because there's a way, and that's a huge part of the book is how do we mature our honesty so that it actually creates connection instead of the immature honesty or just like, I'm just going to say it like it is. And this doesn't work for me. And I don't like this about you, or you're being an asshole. We can say that's honest, but it doesn't create intimacy. And in fact, it really erodes the foundation of intimacy.
So let's talk about your book. Is it your first book?
It is my first written
Oh
book. I
wow.
had a compilation of podcasts, that I
Uh-huh.
put together in a book before, but this is the first book I've written. Yeah.
Okay. So what inspired you to actually write a book?
That's a good question. I don't know. I've always wanted to write a book and had just set it aside for years and years and years. And then it was kind of one of those things where the circumstances presented the opportunity in this a program that a friend of mine had done, and I made a phone call and had a conversation, and I was like, oh, I guess I'm writing a book now. So
Okay.
um but I'd always wanted to bring together, and I love that I can speak openly on this podcast. It's like I'd always wanted to bring together the intersections of sex and spirituality, and then the work that I did around authenticity and authentic relating. And I felt like, it's not common that all of those topics are discussed in the same place. And my life has been, kind of a patchwork quilt of how all of those things seem like they may not be connected, but how amazing it can be when they all come together. And so that was, the initial impetus was that it was going to be more of a memoir and my own stories and things. And it turned out to be more like some of my stories, some of my client stories, a lot of interviewing experts on relationships. And
Yeah, I can really relate to that because on this podcast, we've talked about spirituality and sexuality quite a lot because it's just once you get to that level, it's just, whoa,
Oh
amazing.
my
It's a whole
God,
new
it's
level.
amazing. It
Yeah.
is. It's a whole new level. And it's one that, can be challenging to find words for too.
Yeah. Because I
And
mean,
also challenging. Yeah.
I think we're taught that, sexuality is not a spiritual thing. I think that's if you
Mhm.
come from a religious upbringing and then you realize that it is actually, it's a real connection with the divine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So how
I mean, a couple of things, like when you said something even before we started, I just got chills again. It's like, oh, right. Like to actually feel the divine in your body, in your heart, in your soul, and then sometimes with another person. I mean, it's phenomenal.
Absolutely. So what was your writing process like?
Well, I was part of a program where they taught us a little bit about writing and had an editor and had, some accountability, weekly accountability. So it took me, I think, about probably 10 months or a year to write the first draft, and
Mhm.
then another 6 months or so to do the editing. Um, but yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. I just kind of did it. It was one of those where it was like, oh, this is what I'm doing. So I'm just going to spend Sunday mornings writing and, do as much of the research and just keep mulling it over. Sometimes I would send myself little voice memos when I was in the car, and it
I
doesn't
know
feel
all
like that
about that, the
exciting.
voice memos.
Yeah.
Something that I found that years ago when I was writing with deadlines, just writing articles and a book as well. Sometimes I had this writer's block, and this is before I was spiritual. And I used to just take a vibrator on my phone and go and lie down, and I would start like masturbating. And
Oh,
then
I love
suddenly
that.
all these ideas were coming to me. And I would write myself an email that I would later see at my desk, and
Yeah.
then now I realize it was the sacral chakra, it was all the
Oh,
creativity,
okay. That sounds way more fun. The next book I'm writing with a vibrator. That would be way more of a an awesome
Definitely.
process.
So, yeah, in your book, I've been reading it over the last few days. You just touched on it just earlier, the immature honesty and mature honesty. Could you tell us
Mhm.
what those terms mean and how can we be more mature in our honesty?
Yeah. Yeah. So the way I laid it out in the book is that immature honesty is a lot of blaming and shaming and attacking and not taking responsibility. And, like staying on a surface level of the conflict is about the laundry, or it's about who's doing what in the house, or the money or sex or whatever. And like, honestly, as I've been working with clients over the past 20 years, it's just never really about that. It's so much about, do I feel partnered with and collaborated with and understood and, loved and cared for? And so if we go to this deeper level of not just the surface conflict, but the vulnerability of, I'm not feeling heard, or I'm not feeling seen, or I'm not feeling loved. Like if I take responsibility for what feels vulnerable about this for me, then I start to come from a more mature place. So instead of, you came home late and you're an asshole, it's like, you came home late and then I was worried that, well, first of all, I might have been worried that you got hurt or that you weren't okay. Second of all, like I didn't feel respected in that moment. I didn't feel cared for. And, not having the kind of like yelling or blaming or shaming or attacking that just goes down this downward spiral where then everybody's defending against each other, and how to really have an intimate conversation where something can be resolved and moved forward.
So would you say it's focusing on how you feel rather than attacking the other person or Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah, a lot of, okay, so if we're going to have mature honesty, it's right, how I feel, the impact that your actions had on me. And, sometimes it's easy to say, well, I think you're an asshole or I feel you're an asshole, right? And like turn it right back around to someone else. But, really it might be more like, I feel sad or I feel lonely. So, there are ways in the book to start tapping into, all right, how do I shift my honesty to make it more mature? And how do I actually say what's true for me? Because I don't know about you. I think this is true for a lot of women, but I think it's true for people of all genders that sometimes we do feel hurt or we feel missed or something like that. And then we just like, we feel ashamed and like, oh, I shouldn't feel that way. And maybe I'm too much. I'm asking for too much. And so instead of shoving that under the carpet and trying to just, move along, it's like, oh, I'm actually going to say some of these things in a mature way and ask for things from my partner so that we can co-create something beautiful together.
Definitely, definitely. I think it's good to take the blame and the ego battles out of these things for sure.
Yes.
Mhm.
And it's so easy. I mean, I'm divorced about 10 years ago, and we had a lot of ego battles and a lot of me not feeling worthy. And so then I would, emotionally just be more volatile or explosive. And I really committed after my marriage ended that I was not going to speak like in a conflict. I wasn't going to speak until I could say something that would forward the situation instead of taking it down that downward spiral. And, I'm not always perfect, but I'm kind of amazed at how if we don't give ourselves permission to blame and shame and attack, then we have to actually stop and pause and digest and, bring something that actually is more mindful. And I think if I can do it, I know other people can do it too.
Yeah, it takes a lot to kind of admit that you're maybe wrong in some ways. And because I remember when I look back at my relationships, I think how high maintenance I was. I was always
Yeah.
pointing the finger. And then with
Yeah.
time and experience, I've kind of seen or acknowledged my own part of it. And
Yeah.
yeah, it takes time at least.
It really does. And yeah, one of my favorite quotes that I have in the book is the Viktor Frankl quote. I don't know if you know him, where he talks about how between stimulus and response there is a space. And in that space, it's basically like our capacity to choose how we're going to engage, and we can engage in a way that feels shitty or um like I said, degrades or, like dissolves the trust in a relationship, or we can engage in a way that is kind and loving and caring and builds that trust.
Great. Just speaking of, I had this question actually. I've built my own conscious community here in Barcelona, and we have
Yeah.
questions on the table for like ice-breaking conversations. And one of the
Yeah.
topics was relationships. I'd love your opinion on this. And one of the questions was, should you let your partner have the access or the password to your mobile phone?
Oh,
And it was
interesting.
interesting all these different opinions because some people who had, let's say, families and children, they said they needed it for kind of safety purposes. But then other people were saying, but someone could access your messages from your best friend who was telling you something in confidence.
Right.
So it was this, and also from bank fraud. I mean, if someone else has access to your phone, there's a whole. What would you say about? Do you have an opinion about that? Because I just think it's one of
Well,
those topics that we
I
talk about.
love that there's,
Today.
yeah, I love
Like
that there's
work.
all those pieces that I wouldn't have thought of, but I think probably the question is more like, do we have access to each other's messages, right? Because it's not really like, it's not like I want your bank records. It's like,
Yeah.
are we trying to follow each other's, who you're talking to and what you're saying and how it happens? And I don't know. I've always been a very trustworthy person, and I feel like people can trust me. So I've never thought of that or wanted that. Um, I don't know. I guess my hope would be that there's enough trust in a relationship that that's not needed. So
Yeah.
that kind of skirts the question a little bit, but
I totally
that's
agree.
where I would
But
go with it.
I guess with some people who have kids, the kid has the password so they can actually play on different apps
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
cartoons and games and stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah. That's a bit of a confusing one. And I had a couple of
I know
friends who
my kid
had
has
access, and then they discovered infidelities that way. So
I
it was thanks to that they found out sooner rather than later. So it's just the
yeah.
whole, it's a very sticky question. So going back
Yeah,
to
well, and it's interesting going back to honesty, right? It's like
Mhm,
infidelity is just based in this lack of honesty.
mhm.
Um, and I don't know, maybe I should, but I should really try not to blame, like, oh, the one who had the affair is the one to blame. It's like usually what people find as they dissect what happened is, again, there wasn't intimacy, there wasn't honesty, there wasn't a, hey, I want to really know you deeply, and I want to um my sense of what happens when there's mature honesty is that there's this ever evolving, it gets to a spiritual place where there's this ever evolving moment that's always changing and that's always breathing more life and love into us. It's not always easy. I'm not going to make it like, oh, it's always a field day, but um I think that's a big reason why relationships break down and why people have affairs is like, oh, I don't feel that closeness or that connection anymore. And then, but once that is in place, that's where I think passion actually has a better chance of staying alive because we're not playing with these rote scripts and games and lines. We're actually like here
Yeah.
fully in the moment, seeing what turns us on right here, right now versus who we were a day ago or a year ago.
So going back to honesty with ourselves, something in your book about when we're not communicating, when we don't enjoy something, let's say in sex, I think this is something that's
Yeah.
really dangerous. I mean, I think also there's a lack of consent on the other person because they don't know they're not
Mm.
enjoying it. So it's a
Uh-huh.
very
Uh-huh.
sticky situation. I think I can speak for myself and maybe a lot of other women as well who've been in
Yeah.
situations where they've had their maintenance sex, perhaps. You know what I mean? Just to
Yeah.
try and keep someone happy
Keep
or just
someone happy.
yeah. And then you're kind of like thinking, oh, I think this is
Oh,
a
I feel
really,
so sad about
yeah,
that too, though. It's like,
yeah,
oh, so if maintenance sex is happening, then I would imagine there are many desires that women could tap into of like, oh my God, if it was really going the way I wanted it to, I would have this or it would be this way. But then we get too scared to say so and to rock the boat. And I don't want to risk, breaking this relationship. And that's one of the things that really scared me for a long time. If I say this, it's going to break everything and I'm going to fuck everything up and it's all going to fall apart. And so I get to then be with, there's a part in the book too about our parts, right? Like that part of me that's afraid of breaking everything is a younger one who's going to be scared all the time, And I get to bring in my more mature ones to say, oh, sweetheart, it's okay. I know you're scared. And if we don't say what's true for us, then we just end up in this like dull gray, right? It's all going to fall apart anyway and not in a pretty way. So,
I've always felt very angry with myself when I've been in a situation like that, more
yeah.
than the other person. I felt like it's almost a self-rape situation because I have,
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
really, really spoke.
Right. Like if somebody doesn't know, I had a dream actually recently where I was having sex with someone and I told him something about how I didn't like it. And then he kept going. And I was like, great, is that rape? Is that not rape? Like, we don't need to get into the details, but I love that term that you just said, the self-rape. It's like, oh, not to blame or be to, make ourselves wrong too. But it's like, if we're not communicating and we're not saying what we want or need, ideally someone else would be connected enough that they could feel that. But the reality is we have to also speak up for ourselves and what we want or need. And that's separate from, a rape situation,
Oh,
right? Of
absolutely,
course,
yeah.
where we're overpowered. And yeah,
Mm.
so I don't want to blend those two together, but it's, yeah, in the book, there is a story about a woman who was like decided that, she was never going to have the sex life she wanted with her husband. And so she didn't say when she didn't like something or when something wasn't working for her. And that's just, then it's inevitable, right? That it's going to go that way. So at least if we start to speak up,
Mm.
then we have the chance. And I often start, when I speak up something like that, I often start by saying, I feel scared to say this, or this feels really scary, or I'm afraid of hurting your feelings, or I don't know where this is going to go. And that feels kind of terrifying. So also I encourage my clients to come forward with that vulnerability, not like, we have to seem like we've got it all together.
Yeah, definitely. Because the way you say it is key. So I
Yeah.
loved the definitions of sex you had in what was the chapter called about sex? What is
What
sex?
is sex
Yeah,
actually?
I really loved
Yeah.
it. I really loved it where you said it. I think it was a quote from Esther Perel, but it's a place you go, and also you said it was has the potential for play, intimacy, and spiritual experiences, which I totally agree with.
Mm-hmm.
And you shared something about from your own journey about going to, I think it was the tantra part about different sex parties or something, and then you saw
Yeah.
profane to sacred, and then you thought everything is sacred. I thought that was so
Yeah.
intriguing. Can you tell
Yeah.
us more about that and how you can see everything as sacred?
Everything is sacred. I mean, yeah, I guess I often like to say to my clients, it's like all of your desires are innately good, right?
Mm.
Some of them you may act out, some of them you may not, right? You may even have desires that don't involve consent, and you may realize, okay, I'm not going to act that one out, or I could play it out with consent, but I just like innately, none of our desires are bad as long as we have a willing or wanting, mature partner who's there with us. So I think the sacredness comes in when we recognize, oh, a lot of the shame that we've held about what we want or what we like doesn't actually have to come into the picture. Now, it usually does, and it slips in some way or another. And then it can be really sacred to stop in the middle of an experience and say, like, whoa, I just got hit with a wave of shame, or, I just dissociated because I felt scared, and like to actually be with that together as partners to me is where it's at, because then it can seem like, oh no, we're derailed and we're not having sex, and but usually it comes back in such a deeper way. There's a chapter also, the myth of happy sex,
Uh,
and where I talk about an experience with a partner where I wasn't really there. I was kind of checked out, and he was like, "What's going on? Where are you?" And as he asked me, I realized that I had been to a funeral that day, and I was just still in this grief. But I was like, I was trying, because we only saw each other once a week, and it was like, if we don't have sex now, we're not, So I was like, okay, I'm on board. I'm going to try this. But he, to his credit, really noticed, like, you're not quite here. And it was such a beautiful thing where he just held space while I cried and, moved some of that energy through. And then we made love, and it was gorgeous. Like, it was like, it's so much richer than it would have been
mm.
on an average day. Right. And so that's where I also feel like, okay, the sacredness comes in when we're really willing to know that everything is a doorway to connection. We don't have to think, oh, I'm feeling angry or sad, and that means I shouldn't have sex, or we can't be connected through that. We can actually create connection through all of it.
Absolutely. I think vulnerability is really sexy. I remember one guy
Yeah.
I was in a relationship with many years ago, and he never told me until recently that I was his first. So
Oh,
really a
wow.
strange situation because he was trying to kind of act as if he was experienced
Right.
and I was experienced. I was talking about all of my experiences in the past because I've always been quite sexual. And any kind of vulnerability he shared with me, it kind of turned me on, and I let him know. And he really liked that. He'd tell me in
Yeah.
retrospect that it really, encouraged him. Because if
Yeah.
you don't know what you're doing, then you're going on top of someone and doing all the movement, it's kind of like, whoa, what are we doing here?
Yes.
But it was
Yeah.
I think
I
vulnerability is
love
very
that.
sexy, yeah. And you also
Yeah.
mentioned this
And
book. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, like, I encourage people to be vulnerable. And a lot of men, especially, say, like, yeah, I don't want to show that I don't have experience or that I don't know what I'm doing. And I often say, like, willingness is way higher, in my book. Like, I would rather someone be willing to get to know my body specifically on each day of the month, than like come in with, oh, I'm this crazy tantric lover and I know exactly what I'm doing, but not really be willing to know me, like, so I think vulnerability is beautiful, and it can be really challenging for people when they are afraid they're not going to be loved or seen as attractive anymore. And so I think it's a lot of the work I do with my clients, especially the men, is to create a safe space for them to start to be vulnerable and know, oh, I'm still loved and cared for.
Yeah, actually, you mentioned this book as well, which I love this book, The Art of Sexual
Oh
Life.
yes,
Seriously
I
love
love
it.
it.
But one thing that stuck out for me in this book was the exercise about the genital shame. I just think that's such a
Mm,
powerful thing where you can talk to your partner about how you feel about your genitals. Because I think there's a
yeah,
lot of pressure also for men and women, from the
yeah,
porn industry, and I think
yeah,
people have felt that inadequate or somehow
yeah.
or that moment of just taking off your underwear. It's not like, hey, check it out. It's like hide under under, yeah, the duvet, So I think this is a really powerful when you can share all of that stuff with someone. It's
Mhm.
really, really hot.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And I've had so many partners who have helped me love my body, right? They've been a stand-in while I'm learning. I still have, I used to have crazy body shame, and now they're still like, oh, my belly's, a little, I've got the muffin top and you can grab it and it gets bigger when I'm PMSing. And to have partners who are like, I love this and I want to hold this. And, but if I just pretended like I'm good, then I wouldn't get to have some of those intimate experiences that are admittedly, right, like scary. And I've cried my eyes out at certain points, but then we actually get to be closer through it.
Absolutely. Another book you mentioned, because I've got similar taste here, was the
Yes.
Cupid's Poisoned Arrow. I love this
Oh,
book.
great.
Yeah,
Yes.
I found it quite hard. It's not an easy read, but the
Yeah.
idea is so intriguing about Carezza and about having no sexual climax for maintaining intimacy. When I mention this to people, are like, "What? No way!" So, what is your experience of Carezza? And would you like to
Yeah.
explain what it is and how you work with it?
Yeah, well, like you said, it's like I think the goal it's to not be goal oriented, right? To not try to get to orgasm. And for me, that has been beautiful in my life. And that and orgasmic meditation and just, playing with energy without this goal and seeing, can I feel pleasure right here, right now? Can I ride this orgasmic wave? It's different. There's a chapter also, what is orgasm, because we think, oh, it's this like peak and drop. And we can have these rolling waves of orgasmic energy, and men can climax without ejaculating, and women can have, like, there's so many things that can happen. So I think Carezza is often a doorway for people to slow down and actually, feel each other and not be trying to get somewhere. So my definition of sex really shifts from a goal orientation to a pleasure orientation. And I think Carezza can be a powerful way to make that happen. And I used to think when I learned a new tool like that, like, now that's the right way to have sex, or that's the only way to have sex. And now I'm like, oh, come on. We can have sex in all different ways, and adding variety, I think, is also really helpful for couples.
I loved that paragraph about the couple kind of getting it on with the clothes on and not doing anything. Was that the Caressa part? It was just so hot. Would you like to?
Yeah, that was just so funny. Okay, I'm just gonna like say little secret, like that was actually me and my partner.
Oh,
And in that chapter, I was like, oh, there's too much of me here. So now your people will know and nobody else is gonna know, or maybe it'll get out. But that wasn't Carezza. That was just more of like a, hey, we are gonna go to bed together and then we're gonna see what happens and where the energy takes us. And that does take some form of one person kind of leading, at least for a moment, or kind of leading and following and playing with breath and playing with energy. But again, like, right, most people don't have that kind of sex life. It's like, oh, we should go to bed, we should get naked, this is how it happens. And so I love the tantric way too, where we just start breathing and start looking into each other's eyes and start seeing what energy is here, and knowing whether we cuddle, whether we massage each other, whether we just breathe together, like all of that can be insanely pleasurable and connecting.
definitely. Another book you mentioned is actually my first guest on this podcast was Dr. Laurie Mintz.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, she's the first interview that I did. It was amazing. This book is incredible as well. The I think it was in a part about orgasm and meditation. Was that correct in your book you mentioned?
Well, I think becoming orgasmic meditation didn't, for me, that came
Oh,
from
yeah.
experience. I think
Oh yeah.
becoming cliterate was more around, men learning and the orgasm gap, right? That
Oh
like
yeah.
women are having fewer orgasms with men than they are by themselves and with other women. And so right, to really see what's going on there and how to learn a woman's body.
Yes, I think it's also there's too much pressure to have an orgasm, especially the male orgasm. I think there's a lot of that
Yeah.
big rush when penetration starts. It seems to kind of be very monotonous. That's the bit, and then chasing that orgasm and then doing different positions. And it's just like we're both in different worlds, it's gonna be over yet. And if you stop something, it can be
Oh,
the whole thing is deemed a failure, because you've stopped it, or
right.
if there's not that communication there. That's why I think
Right. And if you change the context of, oh, this is play and we're going to have peaks and valleys and it's going to, kind of, no pun intended, is like we're going to come and we're going to go and we're going to like it's like and I think the one of the issues that people can feel this kind of scarcity, if someone isn't really excited about sex or there hasn't been a lot of turn on in the relationship, it's like, oh, well, if we stop now or if we pause now, then maybe it'll never come back. Or it feels like it's like we have to ride that edge so, tightly. Otherwise, we're going to lose this. But I think often when couples let themselves slow down and really start to get to know each other and start exploring, like, what happens when I touch your arm for 5 minutes and we're not going to have sex, intercourse, or I'm not going to touch your genitals this time. We're going to have sex. And it's almost like, oh, it's so frustrating. Even though I didn't want to have sex with you last night, now that we're touching each other and we can't have sex, now I want to, or right. Just getting to play and explore and know each other's bodies. I think it is, again, it's not very common for people.
I think one of the best tips is just to eliminate the penetration for a while. It kind of
Yeah.
gives so much creativity and
Yes. And I
ways.
think a lot of
Mm.
couples who are not heterosexual couples, like that tends to be, there tends to be much more variety in their sex lives. And heterosexual couples can tend to just kind of go in the rote patterns. I mean, same with gender roles and household chores. And right, it's like, this is the way it's gone, but we don't have to stick with that.
Also, something going back to the tantra part, you talked
Yeah.
about yoni massage and linga massage. Can you talk when it's not about having an orgasm? What are the benefits of that of those types of
Yeah.
massages?
Those types of massages can be very healing. And speaking of shame and genital shame and, the experiences that I've had, it's like we store our experiences. Some people say the issues are in the tissues, right? It's like we store history and experiences in our bodies. And so I've had someone do a yoni massage on me and had memories come up and had tears flow or had, anger come out, and just allowing ourselves to release some of those things that keep us stuck. Because usually, if we're feeling some kind of stuckness with a partner in the moment, it's not just because of this moment right here and now, right? If we're ultimately really present in this moment right here and right now, there might be something that doesn't feel good or we don't feel connected, but it's not like it doesn't have that intense weight of years of being missed, or that experience that we had in our first sexual experience where um you know uh, I relate to when I was in high school. I had sex in ways that I didn't really want to, and I didn't know my body was sacred. It was just kind of this thing that people were doing, and I was turned on and excited, but I also feel like I didn't treat my body as well as I would have loved to. So sometimes that can come up now, and it's like, oh, he's doing that thing that men have done since the very beginning. And the reality is he's doing whatever he's doing, and I'm bringing so much to that history and that pain. So the yoni massage and the lingam massage can be a really powerful way to release that energy and free ourselves of what we've been holding on to.
Also a great way to explore new ways of touching that area that are not about stimulation.
Right.
Because I've seen
Yeah.
some I've been to some workshops with the Linger massage. It's just incredible all the just different ways. And I've actually received a few professional tantric massages here in Barcelona, and I was like amazed by the different ways to touch breasts and even like the
Mm.
vulva without where that no one has ever done before. Kind of drawing the triangle. It's like, wow, that's so hot. Or even just around the vulva, which no one would do that to you. They're just kind of going for the clit and just like rubbing. You know what I mean? But I mean, to kind of draw this imaginary bikini is just so exciting. This is
Oh, I
so
like that.
yeah. It's just I just and also I remember feeling Like, I didn't know that my ankles were erogenous, because every single part of you can just be,
Can be erogenous.
yeah, it's just it's
Yeah.
so amazing. Even your neck and your head, these are areas that just
Oh,
don't get enough attention, you know?
all of it. I mean, that's why I think in that I really got through practicing orgasmic meditation and sensitizing my body and kind of being able to slow down enough to feel sensation and pleasure, whether it's the wind blowing through my hair or whether it's like somebody looking into my eyes and recognizing, oh, we have an energetic body as well as a physical body. And so if I feel someone's love or attention on me, like that can make me orgasm because, I've practiced opening to all of those sensations. Like it sounds like you have as well. And so there's just, again, there's so much more when I think about what is sex actually. Like I don't have it that it has to have genital penetration. It could be we are sitting together, facing each other, looking into each other's eyes and breathing energy together. And we're not actually even physically touching. And that can be insanely pleasurable on a sexual level. That I consider sex.
Definitely. So a few quick questions. What's the book
Yeah.
that changed your life?
Oh, what's the book that, oh my God. I mean, I definitely read a lot, a lot, a lot. So many. I mean, the Viktor Frankl book, A Man's Search for Meaning, was very powerful for me. And to see that someone can come through, he was a Holocaust survivor, and to see that he can come through such a dark, right on the edge of death experience and actually find meaning and hope again, that has deeply moved me for sure.
Anything related to sexuality that you find is
Like that was not related to sex.
no, I mean, all the books people tell me, they're all about, a lot of them are spirituality or just life-changing books in general. Because I'm always looking to read, so I want new things on my list. So it's always good. But anything that
I
related to the book that you
remember,
found particularly
yeah, I remember reading Blue Truth by David Data, and I have mixed feelings about him and his work. I think it can be really challenging and people can kind of shame themselves, even though it's intended to free people. But I remember reading Blue Truth many years ago and just feeling the depth of what is possible and the sacredness of connection that's possible.
Okay, I've not read any of his stuff. Any series or that you like, or you that
Like a
about,
series of books.
like Netflix or anything like that you,
Oh,
because I'm always
I'm
looking
not
for
a
juicy
huge,
things.
yeah, I'm not a huge TV watcher. I do a lot of stand-up comedy more than I do shows and stuff. But
Okay.
I did think there was a show about a suburban couple where the woman was not happy in their marriage and she went, and I can't remember if she actually had an affair, or I think she did have an affair, but it was an interesting and sometimes a really bad, like I remember they did a play party and somebody punched somebody else and it was like horribly created in certain ways, but I thought it was very thought provoking for couples of like, what is intimacy actually? What is connection actually? And where do we just start to fall into taking care of the kids and doing the humdrum and not putting attention on us and our relationship, and, how to actually shift that and see each other for real again.
Yeah, it's challenging for most people with children, especially.
Yeah.
Do you have a phrase or affirmation or quote that you live by?
Mm. Well, I think I have a question often, which is how can this be for my highest good? Or, you know, how can this be an opportunity or a gift? So I definitely look at the world through that lens and really attempt to see that the universe is creating a kind of curriculum or things for me to learn as opposed to like, oh, fuck, this thing is happening to me.
Great. My mantra for this year is goddess treatment only.
I started listening to your podcast. I can't wait to finish that one.
Yeah, because I have a group of friends and we've got a goddess WhatsApp group. We're all holding each other accountable. So all of the loser guys from 2022 were like out, they're
No, if they're not treating you like a goddess, no way,
yeah.
no how.
Yeah, so it applies to everything in life, with clients, work, and everything. Is it this goddess worthy? No, yes, or whatever. But I find
Oh,
something I find challenging right now is that I'm currently celibate. So just this conversation with you just makes me realize how much I want to have those connections. And then you're in a situation where, but you're on the physical side, you're still horny. You think, do I do dating apps? Or because you could be in a situation where someone's not going to see the goddess in you. Do you know what I mean? So,
yeah.
so it's just a very frustrating situation sometimes when you're craving this deeper connection, not necessarily a romantic one, but
Right. But a
something
sexual
more.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you're like, well, what do I do? I want the cake, but I don't want to eat the crumbs, or the if
Because
the
you
crumbs
want
are available.
sex, but not relationship, you said?
Not necessarily. I mean, it's not that I don't want it. It's just the I don't want someone treating me like a rag doll. That's what I don't want.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Right. Like only
so,
sacred. I mean, that's,
yeah,
for me, right? It's like only someone who's gonna treat me in right, like a queen, like a goddess. And
yeah. Because all the things
I
you
mean,
mentioned in that sex thing is exactly how I see sex, but sometimes it's like it's not quite my reality at the moment, unless
yeah.
I'm alone. So,
Yeah. It's challenging. And I think it's really powerful to hold that, like, okay, I'm not going to be with someone unless they treat me like a goddess.
mhm.
And I mean, I've had beautiful sexual experiences by myself where I'm, connected with the universe or God or spirit and like having that come through me while I'm having sex with myself or self-pleasuring. Um, and then I don't know what I've found is that as I got more clear about putting out in the world, like this is who I am and these are the kinds of experiences I want to have, then I've often had men show up, even if it wasn't a long-term relationship, but it was like they showed up in the context of, oh, it's deep, it's real, it's respectful, it's sacred. So I'm holding that for you, that can happen for
Okay.
you.
Hopefully. Great. So where can people find you?
Probably the best place is to go to my website, shanajamescoaching.com. And Shana is SHANA. And if you add a slash honest dash sex, you'll be taken to the book page where you can, learn more about honest sex. You can get a free chapter of honest sex. You can buy honest sex, whatever you want to do.
Definitely.
And then yeah, you'll find a whole bunch of other resources on my webpage, including my TEDx talk, like you said, the What a Thousand Men's Tears Reveal about the crisis between men and women. I think that's a really good one for people of all genders to see.
Excellent. Well, Shana James, thank you so much for taking part in this interview. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.